From sailors' lore, the legends of killer sharks were born. Sensational tales of bloodthirsty man-eaters had little effect on the landlocked until bathing in the sea became fashionable in the early 1900s, and shark attacks began with such a ferocity that their fallout created a fear that exists even today. The greatest shark attacks of all time, horrifying events that would shape our view of sharks for generations. Historians would call 1916 a shark year. Sightings off the New Jersey coast were on the rise that early summer, but so were temperatures, and reports of sharks would not deter the thousands of inlanders seeking cool relief. As a result, 5 shark attacks would leave 4 dead in only 11 days, creating a hysteria that would sweep America. No one is sure what kind of shark did the killing, or if it was the work of one animal or several. Now, more than 80 years later, physician Richard Furnicola is obsessed with finding the answer. As a New Jersey historian with a love for the sea, Furnicola was drawn to a mystery that had lots of victims, but no clear-cut criminal.
I believe that it was likely multiple sharks involved in the attack, but I do believe that if one shark were to be held responsible, it would likely be a great white because its past behavior and its propensity to attack man and its viciousness. As far as I can tell, these attacks are unparalleled because of the number of people who were killed in such a short time span. Here you had 4 people killed, 1 mauled within an 11-day period.
The attacks began July 1st, 1916, when unsuspecting bathers swarmed the New Jersey shore. They had little to fear. No shark attacks had ever been recorded along this coast. That day, Charles Van Sant made history and lost his life. The recent University of Pennsylvania graduate boarded a train in sweltering Philadelphia and arrived at the New Jersey resort town of Beach Haven. Before the day was over, he would become the first of 5 victims in an 11-day shark attack spree that would panic a nation. It was late afternoon when witnesses remember Van Sant playing with a dog just minutes before the carnage began. As the dog disappeared into the surf, a worried Van Sant combed the shore for the missing canine. Unable to find the dog, Van Sant took to the water, unaware of the large gray shape cruising beyond the breakers. With the shark spotted from shore, beachgoers made a futile attempt to warn Van Sant, but it was too late. In front of a panicked crowd, he was seized and pulled underwater in a pool of blood. Furnicola's investigation of the Van Sant attack has led him to Miami, where 77-year-old Jack Ott remembers the attack through the eyewitness account of his father.
Well, I was a little kid when I first heard the story about my dad rescuing this fellow that was bit by a shark. And this happened to be 1916. As a lifeguard, my dad was patrolling up and down on the side of the shore. First thing you know, my dad hears a help, help. And when he gets out to the fella, he sees that he's surrounded in blood.
On shore, a doctor from the hotel was summoned, but the damage was done. Van Sant's thigh was ripped open, and with the loss of blood, he slipped into shock, despite some quick thinking by lifeguard Alexander Ott.
He grabbed the skirt of one of those old-fashioned bathing suits and ripped the skirt off of the woman to make a tourniquet. And he did the best he could with what he didn't have, and eventually the fellow died from the loss of blood.
Though sensational, scientists of the era wrote off his death as a singular freak occurrence. They could not have been more wrong. 5 days later, the now infamous Jersey man-eater struck again 45 miles north. Near the still-standing Essex and Sussex Hotel in Spring Lake, bellboy Charles Bruder would become the second fatality. Swimming well beyond friends, he was last heard to yell, "A shark bit me, bit my legs off." Steel mesh barriers went up almost immediately, but it was too late to save the tourist season. What would happen next would elevate the panic to a new level. 30 miles north, residents of Matawan, a small town 11 miles inland from the open ocean, naturally felt immune to the threat of shark attack. Swimming here was confined to the Matawan Creek, a narrow, winding bayou that emptied its muddy water into the bay. On July 12th, the retired seaman, Captain Thomas Cottrell, was making his way home after a successful day of fishing. Crossing Matawan's new trolley drawbridge, Cottrell would spot something that seemed impossible: a huge shark slowly cruising up the inland waterway. Convinced that what he saw was no mirage, Cottrell raced to Matawan to warn the townsfolk. Though the citizens were aware of the 2 previous attacks on the seacoast, no one could believe a large, dangerous shark could possibly enter such a small body of fresh water. Despite his vigorous pleas, the captain's story was dismissed as a heat-induced phantom. Ignoring the warnings would prove a grave mistake. Meanwhile, a factory across town was letting 11-year-old Lester Stillwell leave work early. Unaware of the purported shark, he joined some friends for their daily ritual of an afternoon swim in Matawan Creek. Mildred Fisher, a resident of Matawan in 1916, remembers the boys' frequent trips to the creek.
Well, they used to go swimming there all the time. They used to take a couple hours off from work, and the 3 of them would meet, and they would go take a swim.
This time, within minutes, the fun would come to a tragic end.
Hey fellas, watch me float!
Screaming all the way to town, the boys' impassioned cries for help could not be ignored. 24-year-old Stanley Fisher sped to the creek with 2 other men in a daring rescue attempt. Believing Lester had suffered an epileptic fit, the men dove in, not knowing the shark was still attacking the boy's corpse. As Fisher bravely attempted to pull the body away from the shark, he too was killed, sparking a hysteria that would overtake Matawan.
Immediately after the attacks, how did the people in the town react?
Almost crazy. Everybody was sick over it. They were nice, good, clean men. And they were friends of everybody, and everybody liked them. And it was bad. It was hard. I knew a couple people that were on the bridge further down, and they saw that shark swimming out. They said it was a monstrous thing.
The whole town was, knew about it. It was such an exciting thing, such a terrible thing, because they never had any idea of having sharks up that far, So it was a surprise attack.
The bloodbath was still not over. Heading downstream to the ocean, the shark struck again within an hour, wounding 12-year-old Joseph Dunn, who narrowly escaped with his life. He would be the 5th and final victim of the Jersey man-eater.
A quaint little town like Matawan, 11 miles from the ocean, figured they had nothing to worry about as far as sharks go. When those attacks struck, especially taking a young boy and one of Mattawan most liked young men, the entire town was not only hysterical, but they were out for vengeance against that shark.
With a price on its now notorious head, the hunt for the killer began. Frightened and armed to the teeth, the people of Mattawan would not rest until the killer, or killers, were found. Some even thought filling the creek with dynamite might blast the shark to kingdom come. Back on the New Jersey coast, the greatest shark hunt in history was underway. Though no one knew what species or how many sharks were involved, hundreds of toothy terrors were dispatched, as the war against sharks grabbed more national headlines than the World War being fought in Europe. Shortly after the attacks, fisherman Michael Schleiser captured the alleged culprit just outside the creek at Raritan Bay. It was nearly an 8-foot white shark. When dissected, 15 pounds of human remains were discovered in its stomach, and for many people, that grisly find solved the mystery.
All of a sudden, and for the first time, it became apparent that a single shark was responsible for a series of attacks, and this was highly unique. No one had ever thought about this before. No one had thought that a single shark would come back over and over and over again and start picking off people in a particular area.
Nearly 60 years before Peter Benchley's jaws would terrify the world, the Jersey man-eater, a real monster, terrorized the New Jersey coast. Painter and author Richard Ellis believes the striking similarities between the 1916 attacks and the 1974 novel are not purely coincidental.
I think that Benchley was very much influenced by these attacks. And much of Jaws seems to be predicated on the behavior of a rogue shark. Could it happen again? Would it happen again? Probably not. But are people still being bitten by white sharks in South Africa, in Australia, in California? Yes, they are.
For 40 years, the 1916 attacks reigned as the deadliest in human history. No one believed it would happen again. No one could predict South Africa would be the target. A bloody history of shark attack has earned South African beaches the dubious distinction of most dangerous in the world. Today, attacks are rare, but lifeguards and beach patrols remain on constant alert for the presence of sharks.
Shark in the water, help! Lots of blood, bathe the further starts.
There's a shark!
Without warning, a giant white shark attacks a teenage girl in waist-deep water. As the girl is rushed to shore, the lifeguards prepare for her arrival with an intravenous drip, tourniquets, and oxygen. With her legs severed and bleeding profuse, rescuers will have just seconds to save her life.
Head down, keep the head down. Come on guys, move back here, we need space. Okay, lift, 1, 2, 3, lift. Okay, it's got a serious wound on the leg. Okay, put it on carefully.
I can't feel my leg. I can't feel it.
Okay, we'll have to put a tourniquet on. Stand back.
James Ross, captain of Amanzimtoti Life-Saving Club, leads the effort to stabilize the victim.
Well, the first thing when treating a shark attack is to stop the bleeding. That's what kills a person in the first few seconds.
Can we get the John Rolfe? Can we get the John Rolfe rescue helicopter?
Often people stop the bleeding, but not quickly enough, and the guy will die of shock soon afterwards.
Hang in there, it's all coming right. You're not gonna die. Boss is doing good. Bit weak, but
Although this scene is a training simulation for Amanzimtoti lifeguards, it is a situation South Africans have learned to take very seriously.
the helicopter's on the way.
In the past, in the 60s and 70s, Amanzimtoti became known as the worst beach in South Africa and I believe in the world for shark attacks. Although the last one here was only in 1974.
Now protected by shark nets, the beach at Amanzimtoti has been attack-free for over 20 years. A generation has grown up here without the constant reminder of shark attack. But many South Africans cannot forget a much different era, a time when bathing was banned and headlines screamed of bloody attacks. December 1957. Fronting the Indian Ocean, South Africa's resort-lined Natal coast would become the scene of the bloodiest attacks in the country's history. 100 days of hysteria would forever change the way South Africans felt about swimming in the ocean. In the first month alone, 4 bathers would die from shark attack, a time of terror witnesses would call Black December. Aubrey Cowan was a veteran lifesaver at Margate Beach when the attacks began. At the height of the tourist season, thousands flocked to the shore, and sharks were literally coming out of the water to greet them.
Everybody went mad. A shark actually came onto the sand. We were standing on the balcony when a crowd standing at the water's edge scattered, and as the water receded, it left the shark half exposed for a second or two before the next wave came over and washed him back into the water. That told us that we're on duty there, that things aren't right, and it could happen again.
The attacks proceeded in rapid succession. In front of thousands of horrified bathers, Cowan pulled teenager Julia Painting from the water after she was brutally mauled by a huge shark.
There's nothing more horrific than to see somebody that's been mauled by a shark. People started leaving the town, but a number of them stayed. The following Monday, when Julia Painting was taken on the Margate beach with thousands of people on the beach, that was the end. And it was like pulling a plug out of the bath. The visitors left the town in their hordes. It was said that Margate was becoming a ghost town, while all the lower south coast, in fact, was becoming a ghost area.
George Plowman, involved in South African life-saving for over 50 years, remembers the mass exodus from the coast resorts.
Margate is a small town and it relies solely on the visitor, and people just cancelled. Hotels were empty.
Plowman is no stranger to the ravages of shark attack. For him, Black December stirred dark memories of an encounter that nearly took his own life.
One November evening in 1951, I was out swimming and I was catching body waves, and all of a sudden I felt this, something grab my right leg. It took about 5 seconds, I could feel its jaws moving, and then when I picked up my leg, there was nothing but below the knee. It had been taken right off.
To save their economy from ruin, local officials began an all-out war on sharks. Fear was at a fever pitch. It was time for desperate measures.
They called out the South African Navy and they dropped depth charges in various places trying to kill off the sharks. Of course, that was just a naval exercise. It had no effect at all.
Barriers designed to separate bather from shark were hastily constructed, but failed to stand up to heavy surf. In perhaps the most gruesome of the Black December attacks, a woman was nearly bitten in half in waist-deep water while watching a barrier being repaired. Desperate to end the carnage, town officials were left with only one option: using helicopters they dropped anti-shark nets off their beaches, imitating similar programs in neighboring South African cities. Designed to trap and kill the predators, the netting proved to be an instant success that remains in use even today.
Today there's something like 14 nets stretched across the Margate Beach, but with the 5 nets that were originally issued to us, I caught in the first year 310 sharks. My biggest shark was a 16-foot great white. At that time we used to call them a blue pointer.
For Aubrey Cowan, exterminating the giant white shark meant the end of the attacks and the end of another real-life Jaws.
I am convinced, if you look at the dates or the days, the Wednesday, the Friday, then the Monday, and the following Monday, I am convinced that it could have been the same shark.
For most South Africans, there was no doubt. These attacks were the work of a single rogue shark that suddenly discovered humans were easy prey. Though the frequency of attack during Black December is startling, not a single shark was identified, leaving the culprit or culprits in doubt. Still, South African shark experts are intrigued by the possibility of a rogue shark becoming a man-eater.
My name's Jeremy Cliff. I'm an assistant director at the Natal Sharks Board and head of the research department. I've been looking at patterns in shark attacks along not only our coast, but you see evidence of it in other parts of the world where you get a concentration of attacks in a small area in a relatively short space of time. And it could well be that it's 1 or 2 sharks that are responsible for all those incidents. 34.4.
To prevent another Black December in South African waters, the Natal Sharks Board was formed in 1964 to install and monitor nets along popular beaches. Today, the Natal coast has over 40 miles of nets, and on netted beaches, the attacks have virtually ended.
The shark nets function as fishing devices. They fish out the sharks in a particular area. So by fishing out the sharks, they lower the number of sharks in the area, and in that way they just reduce the chances of a shark coming into contact with a human. The nets are incredibly efficient in reducing the incidence of shark attack, but they're not a complete barrier. In other words, they don't exclude the sharks from coming into contact with people. The nets are only about 7 meters deep, and they're situated in water 10 to 14 meters deep. So this means that the sharks can swim over the nets and around the sides. So they can in fact gain contact with people swimming.
The big 3, great whites, tigers, and bulls, are meshed out of South African waters at a rate of about 150 a year. Because they have rigid fins, sharks swim into nets and quickly become entangled. Once prevented from swimming, they are unable to pass oxygen over their gills, and most die quickly from suffocation.
The meshing crews go out at first light, because that's when the weather is most conducive to operating, and they check the nets. If they find a shark in the nets, if it's alive, they will generally tag and release that particular animal. If the shark is dead, and unfortunately about 85 to 90% of the sharks the meshing crews encounter are dead, the shark will be loaded onto the boat and then brought back here for us to conduct our routine biological investigations.
At Sharks Board headquarters near Durban, the sharks are given a thorough post-mortem examination. Frozen until ready to be examined, the sharks will be identified by species and sex, measured, weighed, and dissected. The dissection is critical to understanding shark behavior. By exploring the shark's stomach contents, scientists can determine exactly what the shark ate, revealing where it travels to hunt and feed.
The enormous livers, here you can see the right-hand lobe.
This information is valuable to the Sharks Board, whose primary purpose is protecting bathers. This 10-foot tiger shark had recently fed before being caught, and its stomach is completely full. The voracious appetite of tigers never fails to surprise scientists, who have recorded a wide variety of prey items inside the predator.
What do you think it is, pet? Yeah? Don't know. Feel? Eh? What do you think?
In one of the most unique dissections the Sharks Board has ever conducted, Cliff is about to discover the remains of a mammal, shark, and bird.
Well, here's the head of a dolphin. Here's the jaw. This is looks like it's part of the backbone. But here's the jaw. You can see the teeth. Oh yes, look at that. It's the head of a sand tiger shark, or what we call a ragged tooth. Big enough to be an adult shark.
With 3 families of animals represented, the tiger again proves its variety of tastes. Perhaps part of the reason tigers are considered extremely dangerous to bathers. Pulled from South African nets, sharks have paid a huge price for their occasional interactions with people. In the 1950s and 60s, it was open season on the predators. But times are slowly changing.
When I joined the board, virtually all sharks that were found alive in the nets were in fact killed. But we've seen a change in attitudes. And now even things like great whites and bull sharks and tigers are released. But obviously one has got to be careful. One doesn't like to do that in peak holiday season when there are a lot of people in the water.
Beyond the safety of the nets, remote beaches with pristine waves beckon young South African surfers. Wave riding in the netless danger zone is high-risk recreation, a gamble that proved very costly for a young Durban woman.
My name is Belinda van Skalkwyk. I'm a fashion designer. I've been working in the industry for about 4 years.
It's Belinda from Swivel. How are you?
Savagely bitten by a shark while surfing off an unnetted beach, Belinda's amazing recovery and return to a normal life is a story of tremendous courage. Perhaps even more incredible is her story of survival after the attack. Left for dead by her panic-stricken friends, she bravely hung on until help arrived.
I was lying on my board at the time with my hands and legs on top of the board, resting. And I was one in the middle of about 15 people. And the next minute the board was bumped very, very hard. And I thought it was the guys playing a joke. I didn't think anything of it until the shark came from underneath and turned the board over. I fell into the water and it started biting vigorously at my leg. I was aware that the people around me were leaving. And my first thought was how I was going to get out of the water. I was on my own and I could not move from my waist down.
As her fellow surfers paddled to safety, Belinda floundered helplessly, but not without hope. From the beach, a fearless friend braved bloody water and the circling shark to swim to her side.
When he got out to where I was, he realized that the shark had bitten through the main artery of the leg, and he put his finger into the artery to stop the remaining blood from coming out, which is what saved my life.
Once on the beach, she fought to remain calm and conscious, despite knowing the gravity of her situation.
I began to panic when I saw that everybody around me was panicking. Grown men that were standing around me and crying, and I had actually looked up and I looked at the leg and I knew that it was a serious attack and I knew that it would have to be amputated just by looking at it.
He's used the same block here. He's used the same block here.
Overcoming injuries that should have killed her, Belinda now serves as an inspiration to all who must live with a physical impairment.
It's difficult, it's very difficult. You have questions that there are no answers for, that there never will be answers for. But as you live daily and as you plow through each little thing, one at a time, you realize that a mountain which seemed as though it were the size of Mount Everest is actually achievable.
Far from nets or populated shores, the great white shark freely roams the barren reaches of South Africa's Cape. While feathered multitudes dominate the landscape, 60,000 Cape fur seals frolic just offshore of this desolate place known as Dyer Island. It is here, in the natural environment, that scientists are able to readily observe white sharks attacking seals, providing information that may help solve the mystery of why they also occasionally attack humans. From the mainland at nearby Hans Bay, Craig Ferreira operates the South African White Shark Research Institute, an organization studying sharks at Dyer Island. Like many South Africans, Ferreira's perception of the white shark has changed in recent years. Now a promoter of the predator, he was once a fisherman and killer of dozens of great whites. In the 1960s and 70s, Ferreira was part of a group of shark fishermen and trophy hunters that nearly exterminated the great white from South African waters. As a result, South Africa became the first country in the world to impose a ban on white shark hunting. And Ferreira has done his part by tagging sharks and collecting valuable data.
Oh wow, this is excellent. Within this area we've tagged to date, I haven't got an exact count, but roughly about 220 white sharks, which is in fact more white sharks than everybody else put together in the world.
In his mission to promote sharks as valuable creatures, Ferreira brings photographers and filmmakers into the white's hunting ground, where seeing the animals up close is believing.
We find that whenever we bring somebody out here, it doesn't matter what the attitude is before. When they go home and they've seen that white shark, they're hooked. They're totally stoked on that white shark.
The abundance of white sharks at Dyer, as evidenced by Ferreira's prolific tagging study, makes the island one of the last areas on Earth for people to experience the world's greatest predator. Now, Ferreira has brought an experimental camera to Dyer that may allow researchers to get an even closer view of the sharks without getting wet. Though the sharks will be coaxed near the boat with bait, divers and cages will not be used for filming. Instead, the cameraman will stay on deck using virtual reality glasses with tiny TV screens to monitor the sharks' movements. A miniature underwater camera can be maneuvered to within inches of the shark's biting jaws, offering a perspective that would be suicidal for a scuba diving cameraman. With no metal cages to inhibit the sharks, they readily go for the bait. For the cameraman, keeping the high-tech camera from being crushed by this 12-foot white shark will be the challenge. The camera has survived its test run and may prove to be a valuable tool to help scientists study all species of dangerous sharks. Unlike nets and hooks, the new camera is a weapon in the war against shark attack that does not kill. The knowledge it might provide science could someday allow both bather and shark to peacefully coexist. Despite a storied history of tragic attacks, many people's attitudes towards sharks have changed in recent years. Education has been the key to a shark revival that has seen thousands take to the water in planned shark encounters. Not all sharks are man-eaters, and as divers continue to seek out the predators, fear of sharks is rapidly being replaced with fascination. Born in the Bahamas, diving with sharks began as recreation for extremists of the sport. Taking it to the mainstream of diving was the brainchild of a man who began his career coordinating shark stunts for motion pictures.
So we ready? My name's Stuart Cove. I'm born in Nassau, Bahamas, a local here. We started our dive operation about 15, 16 years ago and have been diving with sharks since 1985.
From shark wrangler to dive shop owner, Cove saw his business boom as shark-seeking scuba enthusiasts packed his boats.
All of a sudden we were going on dives looking for sharks. If someone would say, hey, there's a shark in the water, everybody would jump overboard instead of, if there's a shark in the water, everybody getting out of the water.
For the first-time shark diver, anxiety grows as the boat reaches the dive site.
Kind of apprehensive. We'll see, it'll be interesting. I saw a shark once, but first shark dive, we're getting close to him.
13-year-old Adam Zakreski has been a certified diver for a year, and like many kids today, sharks are his obsession.
I've always read books about them and been fascinated, seen all the Jaws movies, so I've just wanted to see what they were really like in real life.
These sharks are definitely going to be on a feeding mode. So they'll be swimming around all the time during this dive. They'll be swimming over your head, beside you, maybe even underneath you, as I said before. Now what you have to remember is not to reach out and try to grab them, okay? Do not touch the sharks. It's very, very important.
Though sharks are generally an unpredictable lot, the dive masters have learned how to get up close without getting bitten.
Any last words?
Fucking grown a bit,
We have taken 50,000 dives, over 50,000 dives with the sharks without one incident. It's absolutely phenomenal how safe it is.
These waters are teeming with Caribbean reef sharks. But to bring them near, the dive master comes equipped with 2 crates full of chopped fish entrails. It is an invitation that never fails to entice. The dive master quickly turns ringmaster to dozens of increasingly stimulated predators who escalate the feed to a circus-like scene. Surrounded by sharks, the kneeling congregation remains motionless, overcoming a burning temptation to fend off the frenzied feeders. They have been instructed to keep hands close to the vest at all times, even when a nosy shark is too close for comfort.
You cannot go diving with these sharks, even now where we've been diving with the same animals for 10 years, and go and pull on their tails or punch at them or grab them. If you do that, you're going to have a problem. As long as you're there just to observe them and watch them in their environment, you're not going to have any problems.
How was that, Adam?
Well,
That was a great dive? You like that?
They didn't bite me. How close? How close? Oh, they touched me. I touched them.
they were friendly.
maybe.
They were real friendly.
They're all over you. Fins are touching up against your mask, brushing on your head. It was great.
How was that, Eric?
That was fantastic.
You like that?
That was just fantastic.
I mean, I've been diving for a long time, and divers are accustomed to diving in and around fish all the time, and sharks always had a different connotation, but it was just like feeding regular fish down there today. Just push them away. All they want is the food. They're not after the people.
Yes.
Some of the
extra wood over there.
With his wife, Michelle, Stewart Cove has made shark diving big business. And in the process, they have both become experts in shark behavior.
My wife, Michelle, is obviously my partner in the business here, and of course it was natural that she was involved with the sharks. And we're very proud of her because she's probably one of the only females in the world, and certainly the only female in this region, who actually feeds the sharks.
It's a totally different thing watching it and actually feeding, because the bait's right at your feet and they're all around you. It's a feeling of power once you get the hang of the rhythm or whatever, but particularly in the beginning when the bait box is full, they really are psyched. I mean, they're like all around and excited. Once you get a few of them fed, they start to make more of a rhythm, you know, a feeding rhythm. And once you get into that, it really feels great.
Kind of like the Beauty and the Beast, and she has a wonderful rapport with the sharks, more so than anybody else I've seen dive with them. She's very affectionate with them.
A discovery in the mid-1980s proved to Stewart Cove that diving with sharks was not only safe, but fun. 12 miles off the Bahamian coast, at a Navy buoy anchored in 6,000 feet of water, Cove made his first shark dives with an open ocean species, the silky shark.
They're fast moving, quick turning, very aggressive little sharks. They're named silky sharks because their skin is very, very smooth, and if you rub their skin from head to tail, it's very smooth, very silky. So, and then if you go from tail to head, it's like about a 400 grit sandpaper.
In preparation for a dive, Cove baits the sharks up from the deep. In seconds, the piranha-like predators boil to the surface, scattering divers from the swim step.
Okay, yeah.
In this super slow-motion video, the silkies pursue and capture a hooked baitfish, showcasing their true speed and pit bull-like tenacity.
Okay, it's very important on this dive to keep your hands away from the sharks when they're feeding. They can mistakenly figure that your hand is a fish, and you can see the damage that just a little 2-footer did to this fish. I mean, they do have teeth. They're not like your neighborhood dog. I believe that the silky shark dive that we started in 1985 was the start of the shark phenomena that we have in the Bahamas today. I have seen the attitudes of all people from all walks of life change towards the sharks. When I first started diving with the silkies and taking visiting divers out to the silkies, everybody on the island was outraged, including my competitors. They were saying, "You're crazy, you're going to get someone bitten, people aren't going to come here, it's going to be bad publicity." The Ministry of Tourism almost forbid me to do it, and I continued to do it anyway, because as far as they were concerned, there was no sharks in the Bahamas. But after a few years, people's attitudes started to change. The myths being dispelled. They realized that sharks aren't the killer that we have been led to believe they are. Our sharks are like national heroes here.
From hundreds of dives with the silkies, Cove discovered he could not only touch and pet them, but actually hold the sharks motionless with little effort.
I guess by accident we found out from touching the sharks that if you grab their tails and twist them slightly, they actually go into a paralyzed state, which has since been named tonic immobility. We are actually the first people to discover this.
Tonic immobility has enabled Cove to easily remove fish hooks the sharks have accidentally swallowed, providing a service to the animals that have been the backbone of his business. But neither Cove nor marine biologists fully understand what makes the sharks go limp. Scientists speculate that tonic immobility may have evolved to facilitate mating, allowing the male more time to fertilize the inert female. Whatever its true purpose, tonic immobility has allowed Cove to demonstrate just how docile a shark can be.
Quite often when we go diving, the divers are very apprehensive to get into the water. The sharks are swimming all around the surface, but after a few minutes they realize that these are just fantastically magnificent, wonderful creatures, and quickly the fear dissipates. And when they come out of the water, they are so pumped and thrilled that I think they're cured of the fear of sharks. In one dive, that's all it takes.
For many people of the Jaws generation, diving with sharks is akin to skydiving or mountain climbing, the ultimate test of one's own courage.
So how are you feeling about this, Alda?
Nervous.
Yeah?
Yeah, but I haven't thought about it much yet, so we'll see when we get there.
I think I'm ready for it. I don't know. We'll see when we get in the water. That'll be the true test, so.
Every day we see people out there, and sometimes the boat's real quiet, you know, on the ride out. Everyone's sort of there fixing their gear, messing with it. A lot of sweat every time. And then when they get in the water, at first you see them sort of looking around. They're not really concentrating on diving. And once they get into it, it's just, they're so psyched. They get out of the water and they're like, that is the best dive I have ever done.
This is the shark dive. Now here we are at a site called Shark Wall. The reason why we call it Shark Wall is because we have a very beautiful wall over here, and we have an awful lot of sharks in the area. What you should do first is empty all the air out of your BC and then sit right down, either on both knees like this or one knee and one foot. I actually like this way. It's much, much more comfortable, and the sharks can swim underneath your legs. Okay? All right?
Yeah, I'm coming, I think. If I'm not behind you, go ahead without me. I'm not. I'm making my way there.
All right.
And I count to 5. Right?
Starting at Shark Wall, Judy and Alda experienced their first sharks, a group of 7 to 8 footers of the Caribbean reef variety. Without bait, the sharks are wary, but curiously survey the divers in hopes of a handout. The real action begins on the second dive of the day, a feeding session at a place called the Runway, where the sharks arrive in big numbers and always with huge appetites. To protect his hands from an accidental bite, the shark feeder wears chainmail gloves, used by some butchers to prevent laceration. For Judy and Alda, the only protection is to remain calm and as still as possible. In this whirlwind of activity, a shark could easily mistake an arm or leg for a piece of bait. Amazingly, no diver has been bitten during a feeding session, a tribute to Stewart Cove's years of careful observation of reef shark behavior.
After a few hundred dives, we started to realize these sharks are like the silkies. They're not interested in eating people or biting people, and we were able to start to feed the sharks off a spear. And nowadays, as you've seen, we have 20, 30 sharks going under our legs, bumping into us, and we're feeding them in a very controlled manner and in a very safe manner.
How's that, Judy?
Oh, that was great.
You like that?
They're wonderful.
How was that?
Oh, it was unbelievable.
Unbelievable?
I can't believe that came that close.
In the span of one generation, the perception of sharks has undergone rapid changes. Once universally despised, there is a ray of hope for man's relationship with the shark. A new beginning of peace for two timeless enemies.